All right. Good morning, Chair Postman, staff, and guests. The lobbies are open. Recording has begun.
Thanks, Justin. We will convene the Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for July 3rd, 2023. Board members Vollendroff and Garrett are both on leave today. So I'm all you got. We will start with updates, etc., from our Policy and Rules Division, and I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Hoffman, our Research Manager.
Great, thank you, Chair Postman, and good morning, others in the room. No other board members to greet this morning. So I'm going to start this morning with the staffing update. Some very happy news to share. Cassidy West will be our new Policy and Rules Manager starting July 16th. We're all very excited about this, and so excited to see Cassidy in this role.
Yeah, congratulations, Cassie.
Well, thank you. I did learn from the best. So
Yeah, good. That's exciting. That's great.
Thank you, Cassidy. We'll be transitioning in the next few weeks, and just so you know, I'll still be lurking in the ether during board meetings and stuff, but Cassidy will take over that role starting August 16th, or I'm sorry, July 16th. Sorry. So this really is kind of my last caucus and last board meeting that I'll be presenting to you in this role.
You'll have that other hat on next time we see you.
I'll have that other, yes. Yes, I will have the doctoral hat on from starting on the 16th instead of the construction hat. So happy news to share there. So what that means is we will be hiring for Cassidy's position, so a new rules coordinator. And just to give you a little bit of an update, we are starting interviewing for the Operations Research Specialist. I think the title is for the new research unit starting this Friday, so that's coming along. And then we're still continuing to recruit for the Management Analyst 5 or Research Assistant in the new research unit as well. So that's it for staffing updates. Want to get into project updates now, and I'll go ahead and start on the cannabis side. No change on the mailing checks project. That is still on hold. We do have that. Hope to resurrect that soon, but for now, that project is on hold. With respect to implementing 5367, sorry, that's the THC bill. That is the work that Cassidy is leading. Of course, CR 101 was approved on June 21st. We are on track at this point to bring a 102 on November 1st, like we had planned in the past, with a hearing in mid-December, and then rules effective first part of January or thereabout. Same is true of cannabis sampling, still on track there. Do hope to have the CR 102 filed on or about September 27th. Cassidy's got a really good set of survey questions she's going to send out here in the next couple of days, I think, Cassidy, or I think in the not so distant future, right?
yes, sometime this week.
Okay.
I'll make an announcement at the board meeting.
Okay, perfect. So that's coming along really nicely, and we hope to have those rules, or the rules team hopes to have those rules in effect by early December. With respect to social equity and cannabis, we still are doing all the background work necessary that we need to have in place before we get to the CR 101. So stay tuned there, but I do anticipate late July, early August for the 101 on that particular project. And then no other movement on any of the other projects on pause on the cannabis side. I was advertising minors on retail premises, non-retail premises, sorry, and medical cannabis endorsements. Although we do have some work that we're thinking about in terms of a policy statement on the medical cannabis endorsements coming. So that's it on the cannabis side. Any questions at all?
No, not now. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the alcohol side, we have had a little bit of a delay in the project where Daniel will be withdrawing the Class 13 permit or privilege review 101. He was going to do that tomorrow. We do have we're gonna have to do an abbreviated board meeting tomorrow just based on staffing and so forth. So he will be,
Wednesday.
yeah, this Wednesday,
Wednesday.
yeah,
Yeah, just clear, not
Right.
tomorrow. Don't
not
come to work
tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, getting my days mixed up as
Yep.
well.
We all are. Yep.
Okay, right, so instead of bringing that to you on July 5th, Wednesday, he'll be bringing that work to you on July 19th. So the board meeting, second board meeting of July, so he'll do the withdrawal of the Mass 13 permit review and then roll it into the remainder of the 5448 work on July 19th rather than Wednesday, July 5th. So we're happy to see that moving forward. With respect to the trade area work, we do now have our first rules workshop, so moving away from that listen and learn forum that we used to do in the past, moving into more of a workshop model. And there's more information coming out on that in the not too distant future, like maybe the end of this week, likely the end of this week, but that session will happen on July 18th with respect to the proposed trade area rules. And we're going to do we're going to have an in-person session, but we'll also have the ability to for folks to view the session happening live. It's not going to be interactive like a hybrid session, like a board meeting, but it will be a way for folks to listen in and watch the live activity in the room. So we will kind of be going back to an in-person model, which I have to say I'm really looking forward to. I've missed that interaction with our stakeholders. With that project still in line to do a 102 on or about August 30th with a hearing on September 27th and then tentative adoption on October 11th. Private club memberships, I'll be talking about that in a couple minutes here during board prep. I'll also be talking about rules for adoption to partial implementation of 5448. That relates to the hearing that we had last week. 5448 were the temporary allowances that are now permanently in statute as of July 1st, so as of Saturday. And then I think that is the full update on alcohol rules. Global entry ID cards, still in a holding pattern on that. But we hope to have a 101 to you soon on that. And then Daniel will be speaking about the rule petition from Ms. Mitchell concerning the biometric age verification that the board discussed in the board meeting, or I'm sorry, board caucus last week, I believe. Daniel, did I forget anything before I move on here?
No, the only thing I had to add was that actually earlier this morning, some draft rule language on the project implementing the three liquor legislation or the three liquor bills, 1730, 1731, and 1772. That rule language went out earlier this morning. At this time, it looks like we're only proposing amending or drafting rules regarding 1731, which is the Airbnb permit bill. The other two at this time, we don't think need, and the other two bills are the ones that allow minors to work on premises that previously they haven't been allowed to, as long as they're behind the shop and not interacting with alcohol. And then 1772 is the bill prohibiting the combination of alcohol and THC. At this time, we don't think any rulemaking on those is necessary. So our proposed rule language is only on the Airbnb permit one. And that was sent out via Gov Delivery. And if folks want to make comments, they can email us at the rules inbox.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, so that's it for projects in progress right now, and I guess we can move right into board prep. And Daniel will be presenting the petition on biometrics on the 5th. So Daniel, you want to pop back on and just speak to that really quickly?
Sure.
Thanks.
I gave a pretty lengthy presentation on it last week, so I'm not going to go through all of that again. The only two updates that I had were that during the board caucus, I was asked to look into three things. I was asked, one, to look into any legislation that happened recently regarding biometric ID. And I've looked into that. I'll give more details on Wednesday about it, but there was a bill proposed earlier this session from Senator Hasegawa about biometric data collection generally, not specifically regarding alcohol. It was, I think, more geared towards healthcare settings, but I'll talk a little bit about that. Member Vollendroff asked me to look into some other states, how they're doing it. So I have some examples of how some other states are doing it. And then the only other thing was that I did want to clarify on, there's a brief discussion about pilot projects, and I misspoke. And I'll go into that in a little more detail, but just basically, typically we don't initiate pilot projects in response to rule petitions because pilot projects are done through the licensing division. It would typically be a separate process. And so I can go into a little bit more detail about that now, or but I just sort of wanted to preview that those distinctions.
Well, I have some questions about the biometric stuff. So, and let me ask about, so on the pilot, I'm not sure you really misspoke. I mean, we could reject the petition and do a pilot right? I mean, I don't mean you, but licensing can look at this question, right? The question was, do we have the authority to do something on a focused facility or time frame or something, regardless of the petition? If we set the petition aside, let's say it gets voted down on Wednesday, can the agency look at a pilot program for something like biometric age verification?
So I want to be specific because they can look at it. I'm not sure though, and the example that was previously given was because there have been some pilot projects initiated, for example, at Husky Stadium.
Right.
And that one was given as the example, and it turns out that that is a situation that's very specific to the sports and entertainment venue regulation. Because it's in that regulation, and also because of the nature of the pilot project, it was about where alcohol was being served. And as opposed
But
to
it's
the
also
type of
about-
ID.
Well, I'm sorry. It's also though about, like, if you look at the professional sport facilities, it's also about what they're allowed to serve and how they serve it. Can it be, pre-mixed, batched cocktail? Yeah, that's what made me wonder if it could. But is it because it relates to age verification that makes it more difficult?
Yes, because the sports and entertainment, the professional sports facilities, the regulation that governs them doesn't talk, and I'll go into it more in depth, but from my understanding, it doesn't really talk about how they're verifying ID to distinguish them from other facilities, for
Right.
example. It's just that was during the discussion last week, that was seen as a convenient sort of test lab, as it were, for such a project. But after talking to some folks in licensing, it's not clear that, I mean, it could certainly talk to licensing about it, but I guess that's what I would wanted to make clear, that it wouldn't be initiated from the policy and rules folks, that it would
Right.
need to sort of go through licensing.
No, yeah, and I understood. I did not, yeah, I hadn't assumed it would, but it was just us as an agency. And then on the legislative question, so, and some of this is just because I lived through some of this at the time. I went and looked at some of this and have talked to some people about it. So one of the things that's interesting about this is that if this was biometric anything that the LCB wanted to do, say, if you're going to get a liquor license, you need to, have your retinas scanned. There's a really specific process we would have to go through to be able to get approval to do such a thing. That the legislature, it's 43-386, set out these standards. You got to go to the technology review board. You got to have these like a workshop. They call it meaningful human review. All these different things that have to happen. Now, this isn't exactly germane because it's not the agency deploying the technology, but we would be allowing somebody to deploy the technology for age verification. And there's a part of that bill that, and I don't need to tell you this, Daniel, I'm not a lawyer, that seems that part of the question I guess I have is biometric age verification, could that be considered facial recognition? And I think it sort of reads like it could be. And then if it is, it does trigger this big review. And I can tell you the administration has been really reluctant to do this. So I don't know, I'm concerned about that. And I know in your recommendation and your analysis, I think you do give a nod to the legislature's role here and say, given in this petition, we should say is multifaceted. I forget how many different pieces of it is, but if I understand it correctly, staff's recommendation is that we would not adopt that part of the petition, and it might be better situated in the legislative arena to actually green light the BAV, as they call it. Am I reading that right?
Yes, and I think that whether or not it constitutes facial recognition, because the proposed definition of biometric identifier includes both retinal scans as well as fingerprints. So I think that's where it gets tricky, right? Because obviously the fingerprint isn't going to be the facial recognition, and their state agencies are allowed to require fingerprinting for various types of licenses. The Medicaid does it, the Insurance Commission, lots of different state agencies require, if you're going to get some kind of license or some kind of privilege, they want to have your fingerprint on file. Right. And that's not exactly what's going on here. But so if the biometric, I think that we'd be having a different conversation if it was proposing to just age verify via fingerprint. But I think that where it's going into the retina, and then if you're getting the eye scan, you're probably going to get some other parts of the face too. That's where, and another part of it is proposed voice print, which I didn't go into separately. But I think that you're right, that's where we are getting into facial recognition. And there's also another statute, RCW 19, I believe it's 315, that I mentioned in the petition that refers to sort of where entities are going to use this data or store it in relation to a commercial purpose. There's a whole host of laws that they have to comply with.
375,
375, right?
Yeah,
not 315.
Yeah, and that was interesting too, right? Yeah, such as fingerprint, voice print, eye retinas, irises, or other unique biological patterns or characteristics that it's used to identify a specific individual. And, if you go back to the other statute, they talk about persistent tracking, which this would not be, but it is verification or identification. So I think it triggers it maybe in both.
Well, and in order to verify it, the proposed technology would have to store it. So I don't know about whether it's tracking, but it would have to store it and retain it so that when the time comes that you scan your biometric identifier, it could pull up your ID.
The part that I'm just not sure of, because again, we would be allowing such a thing, but we're not deploying it. The accountability report, it says a state or local government agency using or intending to develop, procure, or use a service must file with the legislative authority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if we're using, intending to develop, or procure, or using a service. You know what I mean? We're allowing private sector to do such things, and I can't tell as the layperson whether that would be considered a trigger here and whether we would be expected to go to the Technology Services Board.
Sure. The only thing that I would say, Justin, and I mentioned this last time because you used the word procure, is that an enforcement division had brought up this concern that where if they need to go in enforcement and check someone's ID and they're like, here, I have my fingerprint, the enforcement division may need to do some sort of procurement process to get something to verify ID. That might be the only thing
And then
that might
would-
trigger it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I don't know what to do. It's a complicated one. But clearly the legislature's had a lot of interest in this subject.
Sure, and that sort of was part of what ended up sort of steering me to my eventual recommendation.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. And we do on this, do we have a deadline of Wednesday?
We do. Because it was filed on May 17th and the statute requires us to act within 60 days.
Right.
They got it in just in time so that we technically have to act by July 17th. But the next board meeting is the 19th. So
Okay. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out some logistics for our board meeting Wednesday, so that's why I asked. Okay, great, thank you. Those are my questions on that. Appreciate it.
no problem.
All
Okay,
right. So thanks for that, Daniel. And then I'll just briefly go over the items that I'll be presenting in the board meeting on Wednesday as well. First is the CR 102 regarding private club membership drives. And if you recall, this is a petition we received almost a year ago, July 28th of 2022, asking the board for one additional membership drive per calendar quarter for a total of 8 per year, and one membership drive on 2 consecutive days during 1 quarter per calendar year. So this is private clubs like Elks, Lions, those kinds of things. And so we accepted that rule petition, opened up the 101, developed some draft conceptual rules internally, sent those out through Gov Delivery because they were just some very minor changes to the rules. Received, I would say, resounding support. I mean, this is the first time I've seen people that excited and in support of a rule package since I've been here. But we accepted comments through March 17th, and they were all highly supportive of these changes. So if accepted by the board on Wednesday, that would set the public hearing for August 16th. And I think I already walked through this on the rule update, but it gets us closer to completion on this particular project. And I think we'll support these businesses and allow them to do more of the important work that they do, like school supply drives. I think of Lions and the glasses, recycled glasses collection that they do, those sorts of things. So I'll stop there. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but any questions on that one?
no, I don't.
All right, and then the final thing I'll be bringing on Wednesday is rules for adoption on that partial implementation of substitutes, Senate Bill, substitute Senate Bill 5448. That was a public hearing we had last Tuesday. And we were, of course, using the exception process. We had a timeline we needed to adhere to here because that statute did go to, and the statutory changes consistent with that piece of legislation went into effect on July 1st. So just briefly, we're not suggesting any changes between what was in the proposal and that we received public comment on last week, but I did want to speak briefly to that public comment. And it was outside of the scope of this particular rulemaking because this was an exception process that we used. The scope of the CR 102 was very, very narrow, and we weren't considering making the changes that folks spoke to in public testimony last week. And what they were asking us to do was change something in a part of the rule that asked us reduce the ounces per meal of spirits that's offered. I know that didn't come out very well. Because at this point, consistent with rule, a spirits, beer, wine restaurant can sell up to 3 ounces of spirits per complete meal. This rule change that we're offering in this 103 package doesn't contemplate that because that rule language has been in place since 2021. And again, the scope of the rulemaking is very narrow, only to implement the relevant sections of 5448. So not accepting those recommendations at this point and just offering the rules as proposed for your consideration on Wednesday. And also,
And just to try to clarify on that. So I mean, we have the authority to make such changes, but in this case, what we're doing is we're using an expedited rulemaking process that just is to implement legislation that was passed this session. And where we're up against it, so to speak, is that law went into effect July 1st. We have no rules in place. This is the fastest way we can get rules in place. If we chose to take a different approach and not use expedited, our enforcement education and our licensing staff would have to deal with these things without any rulemaking in place. Is that correct?
that is correct. Yeah. So what these parts of 5448 that are being implemented right now do a couple things. First is make the outdoor service permanent, because that was part of what the legislation did. The legislation also removed sunset. So in other words, made parts of the rule permanent. And then it also extended parts of the rule to a new sunset date of July 1, 2025. So that's what's reflected in the rules that'll be proposed for adoption. The legislation did not say anything about changing how many ounces of spirits can be sold per meal. And so we're not implementing that here. I would offer that if that was something that the board wanted to do, we'd have to go back and refile a new CR 102. Because that would have expanded the scope of the rulemaking significantly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't have the authority to do so.
That's
but we
absolutely
don't
right.
Have the ability to do so in an expedited manner. We wouldn't be able to use this process. We use rulemaking would take much longer and we'd be left without rules in place. So we're
Yeah.
not going to be able to entertain those changes as much as some of us might want to. So
That's absolutely right. And the other thing, I would offer is that I think there was some very robust discussion around that, and certainly something the agency can consider in the future. Um, there's a number of ways we can have that conversation, but not to get these rules in place as expeditiously as the agency needs them.
okay, great, thank you.
All right, and that's the conclusion for us and the rules team.
Okay.
Unless for the rest of the rules team, have I forgotten anything?
You're good on this end.
Okay. All right, that's it for us. Thank you.
Great, we'll see you all tomorrow. And that takes us to board and executive assistant reports. Do you have anything, Dustin?
Not today. Thank you, Chair.
No, me neither. Okay, then that's that. Just once again, first, congratulations to Cassidy West, who's going to be our new policy and rules lead. That's going to be great. And we have not set a time yet, have we, for Wednesday's board meeting or?
No, not yet. We're still working some logistics, but I should have that posted by the end of the day.
Okay, yeah. So just so folks who are listening know, keep an eye out for that. It's possible it won't be at our normal time, maybe at our normal time, but we're trying to deal with some logistics. So, okay, that's that. With that, we will adjourn the caucus meeting for July 3rd. Everybody have a good 4th of July.